important part of events like the Bloomberg New Economy Forum, one of the key objectives is really business networking. And in business networking, you do want to meet as many people as you can.
Trade and Industry Minister Gan Kim Yong explaining the rationale behind the 5-person dine-in rule for the Bloomberg Forum. Is China still pressing on with the zero-tolerance strategy amid a resurgence of new COVID-19 cases? And ST's senior correspondent shares the horrific hallucinations faced by an ex-LSD user. You're watching The Big Story. I'm Olivia Quay. You can subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you never miss a single episode. Trade and Industry Minister Gan Kim Yong stressing today that business networking is a key objective of November's Bloomberg New Economy Forum, which is why authorities are relaxing dine-in restrictions for forum delegates that don't extend to the rest of the population. These delegates can dine in groups of up to 5 at forum venues and other designated restaurants in Singapore. And this will help the running of the forum, which Mr. Gan says is an important event that will contribute to Singapore's status as a hub city. That will in turn support economic recovery and create good jobs for Singaporeans.
We have to bear in mind that an important part of events like the Bloomberg New Economy Forum, one of the key objectives is really business networking. And in business networking, you do want to meet as many people as you can, but in a safe manner within the time frame that is allocated, the limited time that we have given. And therefore, in order for the Bloomberg Forum and MICE events to be effective, we will need to ensure that they have space to be able to interact with one another so that they can network, so that they can meet their business associates, so that they can talk business with one another. And not just one-to-one, but sometimes they need to discuss in a group setting, and therefore we allow them to have a larger group when they are dining. They also need to make use of every moment that's available, because many of them travel from many different places, from faraway places, and they do want to maximize the value that they can create while they are here.
Well, Mr. Gan, who's also a COVID-19 task force co-chair, was addressing unhappiness from some quarters over the perceived inconsistency in rules for forum delegates and the general public, who can only dine in pairs. To that, Mr. Gan says the scale of risk involved is different.
If we were to open up for the general public, for them to be able to dine in a larger group, this does not apply just to a limited number of delegates of a forum. It must apply to all Singaporeans, and that is more than 5 million people. So it is quite different in terms of the scale of the risk and the potential risk that it may, those who are infected may bring back the virus back home, and they may be seniors at home that will be exposed to the danger. So it is we have to bear this in mind as we discuss and explore the possibilities of opening up dining in flexibility for locals. We are unlikely to see a major outbreak from this forum because everyone is tested every day. But as you test the delegates every day, it is possible that you will pick up isolated cases. They might have been imported cases, or they might have been picked up the infection while they are in Singapore. And these are likely to be isolated cases, and we will have the capacity to manage them because of the daily testing. So it is less likely to have a major outbreak.
Well, looking overseas, China locking down a small northwest county bordering Mongolia after it saw the most COVID-19 cases of the Delta variant. With nearly 1/3 of the over 150 infections over the past week, it's the current outbreak's hotspot and threatening to spiral into a nationwide surge. China reported 35 new local cases yesterday, including in Beijing. The count also includes some reclassifications of previously asymptomatic cases. With more is our China correspondent, Elizabeth Law, joining me from Beijing. So Liz, China reported 39 new cases yesterday, including 35 local cases. So how worrying is this emergence of new infections?
Right. I think how worrying it is, we can take an indication from what Vice Premier Sun Chunlan, who is the top official that is in charge of the COVID response in China, what she said last week during a meeting. So I quote from here, she says that the current situation now and the way it is developing seems a bit unstable, and so we're not sure. And therefore, she says more preventive measures have to be taken. And clearly over the weekend, things have really escalated because now in Beijing, as of today, there are now 15 cases in several different areas, including Fengtai and Haidian, which are kind of far away from the city center, but these are fairly affluent districts as well. And how these people got infected were because they had gone on driving holidays to nearby Inner Mongolia. And that's another focal point of the outbreak at the moment. Speaking of Inner Mongolia, they've actually put about 20,000 people under strict lockdown today. The local authorities have told the residents there that they will not be allowed to leave their homes. So that gives you an idea of the scale, once again, of this outbreak that's happening here in China.
Well, Liz, you earlier mentioned about preventive measures. So what are the authorities doing to keep the growing cases under control?
Right. This is something that we've written about many times over the past year or so. And again, China is returning to this playbook that is well tested, well tried and tested, where they take very strict, very targeted, but very muscular measures whenever there are new cases. So what's happened now is that because a focal point appears to be Inner Mongolia, which was a popular tourist hotspot. So what happens is that anyone with travel history to that place has been ordered either to do a nucleic acid test, or some have been told to isolate themselves at home. Within the area itself, in Inner Mongolia, as I mentioned earlier, residents have all been ordered to stay home in order to prevent movement of people. And of course, Beijing is now being very strict about anyone who is coming into the city from outside of Beijing. But of course, once again, I have to caveat that Beijing is being extra strict because this is the capital city after all, and we are expecting an important political meeting in about 3 weeks' time. So they are working to make sure that there are no slip-ups.
But what China is doing on a wider scale is very different to what many other countries have decided to do, that is to live with COVID-19. And I believe that, China is virtually the only country in the world sticking to a zero-tolerance strategy. Liz, can it maintain this approach, or is it contemplating also living with COVID-19?
Well, that is the million-dollar question, isn't it? So last week, we wrote a story about how there are several top doctors here who are now suggesting that they may start to ease up a bit because this is going to be a prolonged battle. And the doctors, which include Dr. Zhong Nanshan, the top epidemiologist, and the head of the CDC, Dr. George Gao, who said that, in the long-term battle, this sort of lockdowns, they aren't going to work anymore because people get tired. There will still be cases that will go through the cracks. So what they have suggested is that it has to go in tandem with a strong vaccination rollout. China is now asking people to take their booster shots as well. Anyone who has had their vaccines more than 6 months ago can now go for free booster shots. And they are also suggesting that, for the sake of the economy and really in terms of the general health of the country, they need to start easing up a little bit. That being said, we are expecting a number of important events, including the Winter Olympics that will be early next year. So I don't think we're going to see easing in terms of what we're seeing in Europe, in terms of the West, and even in Singapore. I think it will be very gradual. But at the end of the day, I think the sense on the ground is that China cannot go on with this sort of strict closed-off measure for the next 2 to 5 years.
Well, Liz, thank you so much for those updates. That was our China correspondent for the Straits Times, Elizabeth Law. Elsewhere, in a business forum today, President Joko Widodo saying that Indonesia will gradually reopen regions where COVID-19 vaccination rates are above 70%. Around 24% of Indonesia's population is fully vaccinated. With winter looming, German health officials and experts have raised concerns about a new surge. Averaging 12,775 cases daily, infections have increased by 57% in the past 2 weeks. That's according to a New York Times database. A national state of emergency is in place in Germany, but it's set to expire on November the 25th. Over in the US, its top infectious diseases expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci, says vaccines for kids between 5 and 11 years old will likely be available in the first half of next month. The US Food and Drug Administration is reviewing Pfizer's application seeking authorization of its vaccine for younger children, with its panel of outside advisors scheduled to weigh in on October 26th. In non-virus news, Singapore's consumer prices rose faster last month on the back of sharper increases in electricity and gas prices, as well as food costs and housing rents. All items inflation rose to 2.5% in September on a year-on-year basis, up slightly from 2.4% the month before. Meanwhile, core inflation, which excludes accommodation and private road transport costs, edged up to 1.2% last month from 1.1% in August. A new licensing regime for F&B establishments will be introduced from 2023, under which a new bronze, silver and gold award system will correspond to a 3, 5 or 10-year license duration. It replaces the ABCD grading, and in addition to ensuring F&B businesses have a good track record in food safety, this new framework will also take into account whether eateries appoint food hygiene officers, among other things. Singapore plans to further reduce the power sector's carbon footprint by importing around 30% of its electricity from low-carbon sources by 2035. Well, this allows Singapore to tap wind and hydropower sources in other countries. Trade and Industry Minister Gan Kim Yong says this transition may not mean cheaper electricity, as the costs of transmission and backup, as well as necessary grid enhancements, will add to overall costs. Meanwhile, the Sembawang Hot Spring Park could open up a new renewable energy source here. The Straits Times has learned that research is underway to determine if harnessing the hot springs' underground heat is feasible for applications like electricity generation, cooling or water desalination. According to the Central Narcotics Bureau's latest stats, there were 8 reported incidents this year where the drug LSD was seized. This is up from 2020 and 2019, when 2 cases were reported in each year. While all of 2021's 8 cases involved LSD stamps, and a total of 542 stamps were seized. LSD is classified by CNB as others, which also includes cocaine, ketamine and methadone. And last year, 19 people were caught abusing drugs in this category. Incidents of LSD abuse in the spotlight recently following the case of 17-year-old Justin Lee, who died while facing drug trafficking charges involving LSD. The Straits Times' senior correspondent, Zaihan Mohammed Yusuf, is here. So Zai, you've previously spoken to abusers of, all sorts of drugs, and you've recently been in touch with an ex-LSD user. Well, according to CNB's latest stats, LSD is one of the least commonly abused drugs. Is it because it's difficult to get in Singapore?
Well, if you look at the statistics from CNB, what sense you get out of it is that among new users, LSD would probably be among the others. That means under 5%. So almost non-existent in our drug landscape. But what is worrying is that there are private messaging groups here. Virtually it's online, and you can have access to almost like a pharmacy, but of hard drugs. And these seems to be catered to Singapore users, Singapore subscribers. On one such platform, there are about five groups that each have between 200 plus to about 6,000 subscribers, and all they do is, peddle drugs. So it's available to Singaporeans, and from the messaging and the reviews within this post, you can tell that it seems to be local. But I'm not sure whether these are scammers or people trying to pretend to be drug peddlers and so on, who want to con other people, you know. So, but from what I understand, it is available, and it's just that you have to try your luck.
You have spoken to a former LSD user, Mr. Tan. Could you share more about his story?
Well, his story starts off very sad, because at age 13, he's already seen, the Singapore Boys Home. He's been in there twice, and then it escalated to RTC, and then finally prison. All these from starting out being involved in gangs. And, when you're involved in gangs, you meet people who will try to dare you, peer pressure to say that, hey, why do you sniff glue? Try something harder. So it escalates to cough syrup, to marijuana, cannabis, and to heroin. And he's also tried, because of that, he's tried LSD. Now, this happened to Mr. Tan both locally and overseas. That means he took the drugs in Singapore and also overseas. But I think from the story that he has shared to me, there is a certain guilt in his voice, because he says that there was one time a group of friends took LSD, and they were sitting by a pool. They were all high. Unfortunately, one of the participants, she had a trip where she imagined she was trying to escape from a tsunami. And what she did was she went head first into the almost empty pool. It was just ankle deep. So as a result, she hurt herself, her neck, and fractured her fingers. Now, Mr. Tan and his friends, of course, when this happened, they all laughed. They were obviously high, but it took, not too long before they realized that, there will be repercussions if the police or, arrive. So as a result, they all fled. Now but because of his decision to flee the location, he feels that, he should have done more, or at least call for help. He depended on those who were still at the party to make the call for an ambulance to come and help this woman. So that part is his voice sharing his experience. But from now, it's a different worldview that he has, because he's a father of 2 daughters. So while he had his fun, but of course he is concerned that younger people, especially Singaporeans who have access to the virtual world, may find such drugs like LSD easy to buy just with a click, a matter of a click.
Thank you so much for sharing more on that. That was senior correspondent for the Straits Times, Zahan Muhammad Yusuf. He and journalist Jean Au have written several stories on this, which you can read now at straitstimes.com. That's also where you'll find more news and videos. Subscribe to our YouTube channel by hitting the red button below. I'm Olivia Quay. Join me tomorrow for more stories on The Big Story.